My name is Callista Warren, and I'm 35. For most of my life, I played the role of the responsible one. You know the type, the kid who never got into trouble, who stayed quiet during arguments, who picked up after everyone else without being asked. The one who didn't need much. And that was exactly how my parents liked me. They never said it outright, but by the time I hit my 20s, it was obvious. My job wasn't to be cared for. My job was to care for everyone else, especially my younger brother, Damon. Damon is 29 now, and growing up, he was everything I wasn't. Loud, reckless, charming in that way that made adults laugh off bad behavior like it was a phase. He scraped by in school, partied through college, cycled through jobs like outfits, and somehow always landed on his feet. Meanwhile, I worked part-time while studying engineering. I skipped vacations to save money. I fixed things around my parents' house so they wouldn't have to call someone. Leaky faucet? Me. Broken fence? Me. Dad's truck making that weird sound? Me, with a YouTube video and a socket wrench, pretending it didn't hurt to try this hard. I used to think I was earning their respect, maybe even their pride. But what I really was, I realize now, was convenient. The first sign things weren't equal came right after college. Damon had dropped out of a business program for the second time and was working some temp job at a warehouse. I had just landed my first full-time engineering position, and I was floating. I remember driving home that weekend with a bottle of champagne and my first paycheck stub in my purse, like it was a golden ticket. I actually thought, maybe this time. Maybe Dad will say he's proud of me. He barely looked up from the TV. Mom gave me a quick hug and then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, asked if I could cover Damon's car insurance, just for this month, because he was between jobs again. I did it. Of course I did, because that's what I'd always done. Fast forward a few years, and I bought a modest townhouse an hour outside the city. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Meanwhile, Damon was still living at home, cycling through girlfriends, each one introduced like she was the one until she wasn't. I started setting boundaries, small ones at first, saying no when Mom hinted I should pay off Damon's credit card debt, saying no when she suggested he move in with me just until he gets on his feet. That's when the punishment started. Not yelling, not screaming, silence, cold, heavy silence. Calls went unanswered. Texts were suddenly seen, but not replied to. Holidays felt like I'd been invited as a courtesy, not because they wanted me there. Damon soaked it up too, making jokes about how I was the corporate robot while he was the free spirit chasing dreams. And my parents would laugh like he was some misunderstood genius. I kept my distance, built my own life. I had a boyfriend, Ethan, steady, warm, the kind of man who rubbed circles into my palm when I got tense and didn't demand I explain every shadow in my family. He'd met my parents once and afterwards said carefully, "They lean on you a lot." I laughed it off back then. I didn't know it was the understatement of my entire life. Then last year, my grandfather died. Grandpa Lewis Warren was the only person in the family who ever really saw me. Quiet man, sharp eyes. He'd ask about my projects, send me books about leadership, and tell me to aim higher. When his health started declining, I was the one who drove him to checkups, sat with him on Sundays, played chess with him at his old dining table until the sun shifted and the house smelled like tea. So when I got the call from the family lawyer, I assumed, naively, that I'd be part of the conversation about his estate. I wasn't. Turns out Grandpa had passed everything, his house, his antique collection, even his car, to my parents, trusting them to distribute it fairly, and they decided to give it all to Damon. Their reason? He'll have a family someday, my mother said, like she was explaining gravity. He'll need stability. I sat there, stunned, while they told me this like it made perfect sense, like it was logical that I, the one who had been there for Grandpa, the one who had cared, the one who had shown up, got nothing. Not even the chess set we played on every Sunday. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded, said, "Thanks for letting me know," and left. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. like someone wiped fog off a mirror and showed me what had been staring at me for years. But it didn't stop there. About 6 months later, the text started. First, it was small stuff. Help with their internet bill because Dad was between contracts. Then electric. Then property taxes on Grandpa's house, the same house they'd gifted to Damon, who had moved in with his new fiancé and was already talking about renovating the garage into some kind of studio. You know how hard it is right now, Mom wrote. You're doing so well. You should help. At first, I ignored it. Then I responded with polite no's. Then I stopped responding altogether. That's when the guilt trips came. My aunt called to ask why I was punishing my parents. Damon left a voicemail saying I'd changed and that success had made me arrogant. And then, just last week, I got the text that made me sit down and reread it 3 times, like my eyes were playing a cruel joke. From Mom. Simple. Cold. No greeting. Electric's past due. You better handle it. That was it. No please. No can you. Just an expectation, like paying their bills was a job I'd forgotten to clock in for. I stared at that message for a long time. The anger didn't come immediately. It was a slow burn, like a low simmer in my gut that had been building for years. I didn't reply. Instead, I started thinking back, through all the quiet moments that led here, how I'd been groomed to accept this treatment without protest. How every time I drew a boundary, I was punished with silence and backhanded comments about how I thought I was too good now. I'd convinced myself keeping the peace was noble, that maybe if I just gave a little more, tried a little harder, they'd treat me like a daughter, not a utility. But now, I was done pretending. Then Damon's engagement invitation arrived. Gold foil lettering. A photo of Damon and his fiancée Tessa smiling on Grandpa's porch. Grandpa's porch, like it had always belonged to them. I wasn't planning to go, but I thought about the chess set, the one Grandpa promised me when I was 16, after I finally beat him in a full match. You've earned it, he'd said, smiling. Someday this will be yours. I marked the date on my calendar. Not because I wanted to be included, because I wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. The day of the party arrived with a heaviness that settled in my bones before I even got out of bed. I hadn't RSVP'd, hadn't called, hadn't given them any reason to expect me. But I went anyway. The house looked almost unrecognizable. Grandpa's clean, weather-worn white siding was now some trendy charcoal gray. The old rose bushes were gone, ripped out and replaced with a soulless rock garden. The porch had been expanded into a wide wraparound deck with twinkle lights and overpriced patio furniture, and beside the door hung a wooden sign that made my stomach drop. The future home of the Bell family, Damon's new last name to be, not ours. Inside, the room erupted in laughter and clinking glasses. Catered appetizers, designer candles. No trace of the quiet home where Grandpa used to sit with tea and ask me what I was building next. No one greeted me at first. I stood by the door for a full minute before my aunt spotted me and rushed over with a forced smile. Callista, so glad you made it. Mom saw me from across the room, made eye contact, and looked away. Just like that. Like I was an awkward coworker who'd shown up by accident. Dad eventually shook my hand like we were business associates. You're looking well, he said. Yeah, I replied. Then Damon made his entrance, the crowd practically parting for him, like he was royalty returning to his throne. When he spotted me, his smile faltered, just a flicker. Wow, he said, swaggering over. Wasn't sure you'd show. Got the invite, I said. He chuckled, leaning closer like we were sharing a joke. No hard feelings about the house, right? Mom and Dad did what they thought was fair. Fair. The word tasted like metal. I didn't answer. My gaze drifted past him toward a display table near the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. Under a glass case, polished like a museum piece, sat Grandpa's chess set. A tiny engraved plaque read, "From our family's legacy, now part of our new beginning." Something cracked inside me. That set wasn't just wood and pieces. It was every Sunday, every conversation, every moment Grandpa made me feel like I mattered. And now it was a prop in Damon's showroom of success. I turned away before anyone could see what was rising behind my eyes, and stepped outside to breathe. But the backyard was worse, transformed into a full event space. White tents, fairy lights, a bar, a hired photographer, and that's when I heard it. "We're thinking of asking Callista to co-sign the mortgage," Tessa said, voice soft but not soft enough, "just until the new loan clears." I froze behind a pillar. "Your mom said she will," Tessa added with a small laugh. "She said Callista always helps when she asks." Then Damon's voice, easy and cruel. "Callista won't say no. She never does. She acts cold sometimes, but she still wants their approval. She'll cave." They laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A confident one, like they were discussing the weather. And in that moment, the betrayal stopped being about the inheritance. It wasn't even about the lies. It was this assumption that I was so desperate for crumbs of love that I'd shackle my future to theirs just to stay in their orbit. I walked back inside. I stared at the chess set one last time. The queen was in the wrong spot. They didn't even know how to set it up properly. And then I did the only thing that felt powerful. I left. No goodbye, no scene, no tears in front of them. Just a quiet exit that felt like walking out of a burning building without turning back. That night I drove until the city lights blurred and I ended up at a late-night diner. I ordered pancakes I didn't want and sat there while tears fell silently into my coffee, the jukebox playing some old song that sounded like regret. It wasn't a dramatic breakdown. It was grief. For the family I thought I had. For the version of myself I'd been shrinking for years to fit inside their demands. The next day I didn't go to work. I sat in my living room with old photo albums spread across the floor, staring at the girl in the pictures. My smile so eager, so hopeful. I wanted to reach back through time and shake her. Stop trying so hard. That week the messages started again. "Can you call the bank? The water bill bounced. We're adding Damon's name to the property officially. We'll need your signature." Then the final one. "You're being cruel, Callista. We're family." I didn't reply. I blocked Mom, then Dad, then Damon, then my aunt with her passive-aggressive Bible quotes about honoring your parents. The silence that followed felt like stepping into a forest after a storm. Broken branches everywhere, but the air strangely clean. Then one morning, an email arrived that made my blood run cold. Subject: retransfer of property and financial responsibility. I opened it. Heart pounding. Inside was a PDF listing my name as a financially responsible party tied to Grandpa's house. Filed 3 months ago. No one had told me. No one had asked. And now the bank considered me liable for debts connected to repairs, taxes, fees, anything attached to that property. They hadn't just taken my inheritance. They'd signed me into their future without my consent. My hands shook as I stared at the document. Ethan found me like that later, standing in my kitchen, phone in my hand, face pale. "Callista," he said softly, "what is it?" I couldn't even answer at first, because if I spoke, I thought I might finally scream, and I didn't want my first scream to be wasted on air. Instead, I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Grandpa's old lawyer. The man whose business card I'd kept tucked inside the watch Grandpa gave me at graduation. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Langley," I said, voice tight. "This is Callista Warren, Lewis Warren's granddaughter." A pause. Then his voice, warm and familiar. "I remember you," he said. "Your grandfather was proud of you. How can I help?" I took a breath, and I told him everything. Mr. Langley didn't interrupt me once. I told him about the house, the inheritance, the bills, the document tying my name to financial responsibility without my consent. I even told him about the chess set, though I tried to sound detached, like it didn't still live in my chest. When I finally stopped talking, there was a long pause on the line. "Callista," he said slowly, "your grandfather trusted your parents to act honorably. If they forged signatures, misrepresented documents, or assigned liability without your consent, you may have more leverage than you think." Leverage. The word felt foreign, like something meant for other people, not me. He asked me to send everything I had. Emails, texts, bank transfers, anything showing a pattern. That night, I didn't sleep. I dug through years of digital clutter. Venmo transfers labeled "Helping Damon." Texts from mom thanking me for stepping up again. Emails where dad said things like, "You're the stable one. We can count on you." At the time, they felt like compliments. Now they read like admissions. I sent it all. Receipts, screenshots, timelines. It felt like putting my entire adult life under a microscope and realizing how much of it had been quietly siphoned away. While Mr. Langley reviewed everything, I did something else I'd never done before. I stopped fixing things. I blocked every number tied to my family. I called my bank and froze any shared access points. I scheduled a credit audit. I met with a financial advisor, not to grow wealth, but to defend it. Ethan watched all of this with a mixture of concern and pride. "I just don't want this to consume you," he said one night as we sat on the couch, my laptop still open beside me. "They don't deserve this much space in your head." "I know," I said, "but they already took decades. I'm not letting them take my future." He nodded, but I could feel the tension. Ethan believed in peace, in forgiveness, in moving on. I was learning that sometimes moving on meant standing very still and refusing to be dragged backward. That tension cracked wider when Lauren resurfaced. Lauren, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. She messaged him out of nowhere, said she'd seen photos from Damon's engagement party online and realized it was that house, Grandpa's house, the one I'd mentioned in passing months ago. She used to intern at a local firm, Ethan told me carefully. Estate-related stuff. She asked if everything was okay. My stomach tightened. It wasn't jealousy. It was instinct. Something about that coincidence felt sharp. "She might know something," I said. "Or she might not, but I don't like the timing." Ethan offered to shut it down. I told him not to, yet. "Let it play out," I said. "I've spent my whole life ignoring my instincts. I'm done doing that." 2 weeks later, Mr. Langley called. "They noticed," he said. "Your parents. The legal notice scared them." Apparently, my parents had contacted their own lawyer, claiming confusion, misunderstanding, family miscommunication. They insisted they'd assumed I'd be fine helping because I always had been. They were surprised, hurt even, that I'd escalated things. Their lawyer sent a letter suggesting we handle this quietly to avoid unnecessary tension. Translation: don't expose us. Mr. Langley drafted a response that was clean, precise, and devastating. All further communication would go through him. No more texts, no more calls, no more guilt. And then, because life has a cruel sense of timing, I booked a trip. Lisbon. 2 weeks, alone. Not as an escape, as a declaration. I needed distance, not just from my family, but from the version of myself that still waited for permission to live. Lisbon gave me quiet mornings and long walks uphill where my legs burned and my thoughts finally slowed. I journaled, ate meals without rushing, sat in cafes without checking my phone every 5 minutes. For the first time in years, there were no emergencies to solve, just me. When I came home, there was a certified letter waiting at my door from my parents' lawyer. They were shocked by my actions, hurt. They claimed they had only ever tried to give Damon a fair chance at a real life and assumed I would understand because I was doing so well. The last paragraph was the tell. They asked me to reconsider, to undo the paperwork, to avoid making this public. I didn't even need to think. I wrote back one sentence. All further communication can go through my attorney. A week later, Mr. Langley called again. Your name has been formally removed from all legal responsibility tied to the property, he said. They backed off. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like space, room to breathe. That's when something unexpected happened. With all the energy I used to spend managing my family's chaos, I suddenly had room to focus on my own life. I showed up sharper at work, took on a project I would have declined before. My manager noticed and offered me a lead role on a major infrastructure redesign. I said yes. Then I got an email from a nonprofit I donated to years ago. They invited me to speak on a panel about financial independence and boundaries in toxic family dynamics. I almost declined. But something inside me said, go. Standing on that stage, I talked about silence, about being the strong one, about how responsibility can be weaponized against the person who carries it. Afterward, a woman hugged me and whispered, I thought I was the only one. That night, walking home under a sky that felt wider than usual, I realized something important. I hadn't lost a family. I'd outgrown one. And then, just when I thought the story might finally be winding down, I got an email that made my hands tremble from a man named Ernst Reinhardt, an old friend of my grandfather's. The subject line read, regarding your grandfather's belongings. The message was brief, warm, direct. He'd seen my name on the panel list, recognized it, wanted to meet. There's something, he wrote, you should know. We set a time, a quiet cafe downtown. And as I closed my laptop, a strange electric feeling settled in my chest, like the board was being reset, like the game wasn't over yet. The cafe Ernst Reinhardt chose was the kind of place that still smelled like real coffee, burnt edges, ceramic mugs, the low hum of conversations that didn't want to be overheard. He was already there when I arrived, older than I remembered, thinner. But his eyes were sharp, alert in a way that made me instantly think of Grandpa. The same quiet awareness, the same habit of noticing before speaking. Callista, he said, standing carefully, you've grown into yourself. That alone nearly undid me. We sat. He didn't waste time with small talk. Your grandfather had a will, he said. I froze. I thought he didn't, I replied slowly. My parents said, I know what they said, Ernst interrupted gently. They were wrong. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. He wrote it about 8 months before he passed, Ernst continued. I helped him prepare it. He wanted things to be clear, especially where you were concerned. I swallowed. Then why wasn't it filed? Ernst reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim, time-worn envelope sealed with dark red wax. Because something went wrong, he said quietly, and because your grandfather planned for that possibility. He slid the envelope across the table. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. To be opened by Callista Warren upon my death. My hands shook as I picked it up. Inside was a single page. I recognized Grandpa's handwriting instantly. Steady, deliberate, like every word had been placed with care. Callista, if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong, and this letter didn't reach you the way I intended. I want you to know something clearly. You were always the one I believed in, the one who showed up, the one who earned my respect, not by obligation, but by character. I asked your parents to distribute things fairly. I trusted them to do the right thing, but just in case they didn't, I wanted this in writing. The chess set is yours. So are my watch collection, my military memorabilia, and the contents of the safety deposit box at Hanover Bank, box 442. Everything in that box belongs to you by right, not charity. If you ever need proof, don't be afraid to fight for what's already yours. Grandpa. I read it 3 times before I could breathe again. Do you know what's in the box? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ernst smiled faintly. Only your grandfather did. But he once told me legacy isn't about possessions. It's about choosing who carries the truth forward. That afternoon, I went straight to Hanover Bank. The process took hours, IDs, signatures, quiet back rooms. But eventually, a manager handed me a small iron key. Box 442 was heavier than I expected. Inside, everything changed. A certified copy of Grandpa's original will. Signed, dated, witnessed. Insurance appraisals for the chess set and antique watches, totaling over $80,000. A handwritten inventory of military medals, tools, and heirlooms, each with notes in Grandpa's careful script. And beneath it all, a flash drive. At home, I plugged it into my laptop with shaking hands. Folders opened. Documents. Scanned receipts. Letters. And then one labeled simply Damon. Inside were screenshots and PDFs, texts from my mother discussing keeping Callista in the dark, copies of forged signatures on property reassignment forms, and finally, a voice memo. Grandpa's voice, calm, clear. "If this recording is heard by anyone but Callista," he said, "then you've taken what was never yours. And I hope she finds this before the damage becomes irreversible." I sat there in silence long after it ended. This wasn't just proof. This was power. Legal, ethical, unavoidable. I made copies, backed everything up, sent the files to Mr. Langley, who went quiet on the phone when I told him what I'd found. "This," he finally said, "changes everything." We didn't rush. I waited 11 days. Not because I was afraid, because timing matters. On the 12th morning, I called Mr. Langley. "I'm ready," I said. The will was filed with probate as a previously undisclosed document. The voice recording was submitted. The forged documents flagged. Then I sent letters, one to my parents, one to Damon, one digital copy to my aunt. Polite, firm, unapologetic. Return the assets named in the will. Cease all financial contact. Acknowledge the updated probate filings. 7 business days. Or I escalate legally and publicly. I didn't threaten. I didn't need to. On day 6, my doorbell rang. 2 wooden crates. 1 velvet-lined case. No note. Just a label. Returned to rightful owner. Inside was everything. The chess set untouched. The watches cleaned, arranged exactly how Grandpa kept them. The medals pinned carefully, notes tucked behind each one. I stared at them for a long time, not triumphant, not joyful, just grounded. The next morning, Mr. Langley called. "They complied," he said, "and the court has acknowledged the will." I closed my eyes. "You're now the executor of your grandfather's estate." And that's when I made my final move. I went back to Grandpa's house 2 days later, not alone. I brought a real estate agent, an appraiser, and a photographer. The house didn't belong to Damon anymore. Not legally, not spiritually, not in any way that mattered. The title my parents had quietly transferred to him months earlier, invalid. Grandpa's will overrode everything. Standing in the driveway, I felt something unexpected, not satisfaction. Closure. We documented every room, the updated siding, the gutted rose garden, the wraparound deck that looked expensive but felt hollow. The photographer captured it all, the good, the bad, the truth. Within a week, the house was listed publicly. No secrecy, no family whispers. A clean, open sale. Damon found out from the sign. Apparently, he drove past one afternoon, saw the agent's car, and lost his mind. He didn't come to my house. He came to my office. Security called me down mid-afternoon, voices tight with uncertainty. "There's a man here claiming to be your brother. He's upset." I took a breath and went anyway. Damon looked smaller than I remembered. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, the swagger gone. "You sold my house," he hissed the second he saw me. "Grandpa's house," I corrected calmly. His laugh was sharp and brittle. "You think you're some kind of hero now? You took everything over a stupid chess set." I tilted my head. "You didn't lose a house, Damon. You lost access." That hit harder than any accusation. "Tessa left," he snapped. "She didn't want to raise kids on borrowed land." I didn't react. "That's not my fault," I said evenly. Security stepped closer. I nodded. "We're done," I said. They escorted him out while he shouted things I'd heard my whole life. Selfish, cold, ungrateful. Words that only hurt when you still believe them. I didn't. The house sold 3 weeks later. Above asking. I didn't splurge. I didn't celebrate. I did what Grandpa would have done. I created something that would outlast the noise. A foundation in his name. A quiet scholarship fund for students in engineering and history. Kids from overlooked backgrounds, the ones who showed up without applause. The fallout came slowly. Neighbors stopped waving at my parents. Church friends grew distant. Questions circulated. Quiet ones. The kind that don't need answers to land. My parents tried to spin the story. Claimed confusion. Claimed Grandpa wasn't himself. But court records don't care about spin. And without me paying bills, without me co-signing, without me fixing things, their cracks showed. I didn't save them, because saving them was never love. It was control. Months later, I unpacked the chess set. I laid out the pieces one by one, my fingers tracing the familiar grooves worn by Grandpa's hands. The board felt solid beneath my palms. Whole. I placed the king, then the queen. And as I sat back, alone in my quiet living room, I whispered the word that finally felt earned. Check.